Lynn Sanders, the Story Marketing Mentor. The interview today on MinMax Media's Saturday Morning Marketing Smarties in just a moment. Good morning, everybody. Of course, it's actually a good day. It's probably more appropriate. From Saturday Morning Marketing Smarties, my name is Roland from MinMax Media, and we're bringing you a very, very special show today. So we are in the midst of a very new generation of promotion online. And I have trouble relating to the concept of internet marketing anymore because it's changed so much that marketing now means something different than it used to. And one of the most important things that we are focusing on, one of the catchphrases today, is storytelling, telling your story, and story marketing. So we are going to be introducing the subject today, and Lynn Sanders is our guest. But before we go on to Lynn and introduce her, my co-host today is Bill Graham. Bill, why don't you come on and say hi and tell everybody a little bit about Bill Does Believe. Oops, your mic.
We'll try that again. Good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday. My name is Bill Graham. I'm coming to you from Belize, where my primary focus is my website, Bill Does Believe, where I share unbiased information, or what I refer to as the unbelievable truth, for people who might be considering a permanent move to Belize. And I will be your comment manager today. So everybody ask Lynn any questions you might have, comment on what she's telling us, and we'd love to hear from you.
Great. Thank you, Bill. And I've noticed there's several people in the audience, and comment away and say, ask questions and comment whatever you'd like to, because we'd really much like to include you in the discussion today. But at this time, I want to introduce our special guest, Lynn Sanders, who is from Difference Makers Media. And Lynn, say hi to everybody, and how are you doing?
Hello, everyone. It's an honor and pleasure to be here, and thank you, Roland. And I'm very excited to be here to share my stories and help you learn how to tell your stories effectively.
Oh, thank you. And it's the reason that this is such an important subject to us here is we always referred back to when we're doing something, doing a promotion, building a website, anything, and we always ask people the question, why? Why do you want to do this? What is it that your goal is? What are you trying to accomplish? And then the why also includes a very important, who are you? Or what it is you're all about. And that's where the storytelling comes in, because everybody's got their unique story. So I think that there's a big misnomer about what storytelling is. So, there's a concept of just being able to be a good storyteller. In other words, tell a good joke or tell a good story whenever you're talking, and how to tell a story. But the story that we're actually referring to is, what are the individual stories that they bring to the internet about themselves? And I think that that's what your focus is. So maybe you could address this for us, Lynn. I'll hit you right between the eyes with the concept. What exactly is storytelling, or telling your story? What is it all about?
Well, let me just first back up because I realized I didn't give any background, just my company and everything. I'm Lynn Sanders, as Roland mentioned, and my company is Difference Makers Media. I didn't mention that either.
I kind of didn't give you a chance, did I? I'm very sorry.
That's okay. Our slogan is bringing your stories to life. And that means making your stories felt from the heart so that they can come to life and touch other people's lives. I've been in business actually since 1985, originally just a writer. And then I went on to doing video producing. And also I then ended up learning how to do, which we're going to be talking about today, live streaming videos. And I've been doing interviewing really all along since even before I started my own business, because in any capacity, when you're working to share someone's story, you need to be able to learn how to get them to share their own story and then be able to write it effectively. So that's just a little bit about my background in writing. I've won many awards, both for lyric writing and newspaper articles and videos, audio podcasts, and now we're into live streaming interviews. So now I'll go on to your question, Roland. You asked a lot of good questions. So could you ask me just one? Let's start with the first one.
What is storytelling in today's market, in today's focus? What is storytelling? What is it really?
So I'm going to focus on business storytelling because, you know, there's children's storytelling. You hear people making up stories. So when we're sharing our story, whether it's our personal story, true stories, or business story, to keep people's interest, you have to have conflict. There's got to be a problem. Otherwise, why would anyone want to keep listening? If we just said, the sun is shining today, and we're having a lovely day, and that's it. Well, you know, I don't know if you call that a story. It's just a bunch of statements, wouldn't you say? But when you have a story, there has to be a shape, a curve to the story. I was able to listen to one of the top, I think, internet marketers, Jay Abraham. I was attending a business conference years ago through T. Harv Eker's seminar. And I heard him say that to make a story effective, because you're asking what is a good story or story, you start out with what you've accomplished. You start out at the top, if you can imagine the shape of a mountain. I am now a multimillionaire and I have reached thousands of people, millions of people all over the world. So when you say that, you establish your credibility. They know that you know what you're talking about, but they may not relate to you. So then if you picture that shape of the mountain, you have to dip down and relate to them by saying a key phrase like, it wasn't always that way. I'm now very successful, but it always wasn't that way. T. Harv Eker will say he started out in the basement of his parents' home and didn't have a job and ended up getting into his own business. So in any good story, what I like to do is ask people, how do they get to where they are today? You know, usually when you interview people, they have some expertise in whatever their field is, but they weren't always the expert. So to me, a good story starts out when you share your credibility, and I haven't gone into all my credits. Then you dip down and let people know that you weren't always successful, and then you rise back up, showing them how you were able to achieve what you achieved today. So then people can engage with you and relate to you and want to do business with you. So that's how I define a good story.
Yeah, so let's turn this right around and loop back to you. How did you get to where you are today, and in your own storytelling? And what is it that describe your arch to us and how you got to where you are?
Well, thank you. That's a good question. So going back, I'll just say I started out actually taking a leap of faith. I think in any new endeavor, you have to have some faith in yourself. I have a background actually in music education and had taught music in public school and taught piano. And I wanted to integrate both the writing and the music because I love writing. So I ended up making cold calls to TV stations thinking someone there might need a writer or help me. And I was referred to a person who then ended up referring me to a directory at the time called the Chicago Unlimited Directory that had listings of all different agencies in Chicago including music production houses. So I just, took my courage in my hand and I called places, and I found a company that I was referred to this company that needed a part-time writer to write live trade shows for Fortune 500 companies. Companies like Keebler and Haynes and Hoynes and Reynolds Aluminum. And of course, I had never professional experience in writing, just in school and as a news and feature editor and in writing poetry and winning awards. But this company gave me a chance, and they said, before we hire you, we want to see you do some writing for us. So let's do a sample. This is what a live trade show is like. And we're going to combine original lyrics to a recognized tune. We have a composer, and you need to come up with a positioning statement, which now people would think of as branding, some way to remember this story. We're going to create a 5 to 7 minute musical trade show that the focus is to get people to stop in the aisles and watch the show, so they'll be compelled to want to buy the company's products. So they gave me the first client was Johnson & Johnson. You've heard of Johnson & Johnson. And we came up with a theme of Superman, like, Johnson Man. And I don't know if you know that, Roland, but I had so much fun. And they told me the music they were going to use. I was going to write parody lyrics to this tune. And they told me specific details they wanted to come out in the story. They had a budget for 2 talent. So we either had 2 or 3 talent. We were going to create a dialogue, and I wrote for them, and they liked it, and they hired me part-time for the first 6 months. And then after that, I was hired full-time. And I was writing trade shows for Fortune 500 companies and lyrics. And my claim to fame, which I have in my wall above me right here, is the WGN TV commercial lyrics, Chicago's very own Channel 9, that was sung by Lou Rawls. So my story really was that I took a leap of faith. I got this book, What Color is Your Parachute, from the library, and recognized that my interests were lying in music and writing, and I decided I would try to find something that could fulfill both of those needs. And then from being in that company for 7 years, I developed many, many contacts. I ended up doing sales for the company, and after I left, all those contacts I had then wanted me to work with them in writing. So I had lots of people hiring me just to do all types of writing.
So that's the mechanics of how you got started in the industry. But I don't know if we're actually dipping down deep into your story yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought you asked me about how did I get into this field.
Yeah. So, well, what motivates you and supplies the energy, and what is your why?
Good. That's a very good question. I would say I've always been a very inquisitive learner, someone who likes to know about people. And I still remember a check mark on my report card in elementary school: Lynn likes to socialize too much. And I asked my mother, what does that mean? Is that bad? She said, no. But my why is I think I have within me a passion to be of service to people who are doing positive things in the world. I had great role models in my parents who were always learning to, be better in what they, my mother was a stay-at-home mom, but also a Sunday school and Hebrew school teacher, and was always very giving. My father was a doctor, but both of them were really focused on helping us enjoy the process of learning. So as I learned, I wanted to help others learn, and I wanted to help others share their stories, because I could see it could make them feel good. And I think what happened to me, my story is, we all grow in our stories. We all take different twists and turns. What really made a bump in the road for me personally, and we talked about this, is I was happy writing, but sometimes I found that some of my clients had me write projects that weren't interesting to me. And I just took them because of the money. We all need money. But I found I wasn't feeling fulfilled when I started on my own in 1985. I'd worked for the music company from 79 to 85. And I was working on a project for ACO, which is the world's largest office supply manufacturer. And they do great products. They create paper clips and binders and whiteboards. And so I was writing about staplers, and I just thought, this is really boring. I really don't care, unfortunately, that the staple's only 1/3 of an inch, this, here in this machine, and this other one has a different sizing. And I was trying to write interesting copy about the staples. And I said something to my mother at the time. I said, I think I'm wasting my time. And she said, well, somebody's got to write about this, So what happened was I wrote a number of pieces for clients where I didn't feel any kind of emotional connection. Of course, I wrote projects I loved, and we'll get into that with my book. But at the end of 2004, from November through the end of December, 3 very special people in my life suddenly died. And when you have something serious happen to you, it forces you to take a pause. And you have to think, what am I doing with my life? And why am I here? And it also, I think, makes you aware that we all only have limited time on Earth. We just go about our lives, I think, most of the time, an automatic shift. And we just think everything's going to be the same. And then when something major happens, like someone's passing or an illness, you have to start being more aware of yourself. I think it's natural. So I just paused in my work, and I was pretty devastated. One was one of my best friends from high school, and that was November 1st, and then my mother on December 16th, and then my former boss, who was a very dear friend, a composer, Shelley Elias. So after that, I decided I really wanted to work with both people, entrepreneurs, and companies, especially nonprofits, who are doing good in the world, who had a passion for making a difference. So that started making me more selective about who I was working with. And I think it's also made everyone happier, because then I'm more excited about the work I do, and it helps my clients make a bigger impact, because I always give 110% in everything. Oh, we got a nice comment here.
Yeah, let's see what's going on, Bill. Oh,
hey, Roy.
Yeah.
Nice to hear you here.
Roy is with us. He's saying awesome, because I'm thinking, loving that Lynn is here today. Susan Joy Sleef checked in. She said she'll be listening from her car, but won't be able to comment. So, and I'll be on a different email address from my phone. So thank you, Susan, for joining us. We Wake has joined us. He says, once upon a time there lived and then he realized that today is about Lynn Sanders' story. So he's turned it back to Lynn and to Roland for that. Ross Bett has checked in from South Australia. So thanks for getting up and being with us so early, Ross. I know it's very early where you are this morning. Lolan has checked in from Victoria. She says, good morning all from Victoria, BC. Looking forward to meeting Lynn Sanders. Hi. And Alana Birmingham has joined us from Ireland and says, hello all.
Wow.
And Lolan made a comment that it's interesting that many websites neglect to tell the why and the who, which, is very important. Andrew has joined us. He says his story would open, I am independently destitute. But I know Andrew that he's got a lot of friends, and he's a very giving guy. So I bet you he's actually pretty rich in that respect. And I think that's it for now. So thank everybody for joining us. And everybody's very interested in your story, Lynn.
Oh, thank you. I'm very touched to have so many people from all over the world. This is what's so wonderful about this format, that I could actually be able to speak to you, and you can hear me and see me. It's all modern technology that never existed. When I was a kid, if I made a long distance call to California, that was a really big deal, Now we can actually communicate like this.
And we had to watch our pennies back then.
Oh, definitely.
I can talk to you, and it virtually doesn't cost me. In addition to what I've already got set up, there's no cost at all. And in the mix of things, there's a little bit of cost, but it's so much cheaper today to do so much more.
I wanted to add one thing, if I could, roll into this whole story message to everyone here. I've been reading a lot of philosophical books because I really like contemplating, the deeper meanings of life. And I had an appointment this morning with a physical therapist because I'm working on getting my knee back in shape. And I was telling her about this program coming up. Her name is Cindy Powers. And I said, we all are really living by our stories, and we may believe things about ourselves that aren't true. We decide what our stories are, and then we make decisions by our thoughts. And then she said, which I thought was a great synopsis for all of us to contemplate, we can decide we can define ourselves by our stories, or we can let our stories define us. We can define ourselves by our stories. So if something negative that we consider to be negative happens, we can choose to live in a negative space, or that's, define ourselves by our stories, or the stories defining us, or we can go outside the box and decide that we're going to create our own stories no matter what happens on the outside. So we're all going to have challenges at every step of the way. Even if we are feeling like we've met one goal, there'll be other challenges, but I think it's all to help us grow so we can choose our story ultimately, choose how we live our story.
I really love what you're bringing up because it brings to mind growing and living is a forward movement. It's on from the point that we're at. Whereas when you talk about living in the past and letting the story dominate who we are, we're actually attaching ourselves to an emotion that's already passed, and we're living in that emotion, and it does, to an extent, it just does not let us move on, because we're like using some of our RAM, our brain RAM and our emotional RAM and spiritual RAM devoted to this negativity, and then that negative emotion is what drags us down and keeps us moving on. We are supposed to turn and go. And if we let go, as the psychologist would say, you got to let go of that. If we can let go, it's not a disgrace to whatever it is that we experienced before, and it's not being totally ignorant, but it is letting go and moving on and taking the best of our experience with us that allows us to proceed and to succeed beyond that point. So I really like the point that you made. And
yeah, and the other thing I was going to say is that we all need to be conscious of the words we say to ourselves. So as a storyteller, I'm very conscious of words that I think and I write, because if I put out a negative word, what do you think people are going to remember? That negative. I had a conversation with a business leader recently who said the mind can't process negatives. If you say, you're not a bad boy, she said, guess what the boy's going to remember? He's going to remember the words bad boy, even though you said, this is true, you're not a bad boy. He's going to remember bad boy. Now, I was talking to Roland earlier about a young boy I met who said, I'm bad. And I said, don't say that word. You're programming negative into your mind. And he said, but I'm bad. I said, don't say that. And then Roland brought up the point, well, maybe he thinks the word bad means cool. So it really comes down to what do we attach to that word. But if we mess up on something, then whatever it is, what do we say to ourselves? Let's be conscious of that and realize that we could say, we're growing, we're learning from it, catch ourselves and start living consciously. And then our stories can become brighter and happier and more exciting just by the words we tell ourselves. And we can program them.
And the polarity of that is such that you could be talking to yourself, right? And say, don't do this and don't say that and that's still an attachment to the negative. Whereas we can turn completely and move on to, let's do this, instead of saying, don't do that. So let's say, hey, why don't we do this and move on from there and be really positive. Bill looks like he's got something that he's bringing from the audience here.
Yeah, Lolan is agreeing with Lynn. She's saying continuing to learn is the best way to go into our third age. And in another comment, she responded, great to create your own story life. In other words, we create what we believe.
Right. It's so true. Thank you, all. And that's a really great point. And people need to be aware of that because they're in charge, really. They're in the driver's seat of their thoughts. You know, your thoughts create your feelings, and the feelings create what your actions are going to be.
Yeah. I wish I could find this quote because it was brought to my attention by Ted Rubin, and it was from Zig Ziglar, but it had to do with the concept that we have the power. Whatever we feed our brain, that's what comes out in the process. And we have control over what we feed our brain. Therefore, we have control over the output process in that respect. And we can change what we're thinking, and we can change our results by what we pass, what we consume, what we ingest, and it becomes a part of us. So it all says the same thing. We are in charge if we choose to be in charge, and taking control and taking responsibility for ourselves. So I love these ideas.
I wanted to add something to what you just said about Zig Ziglar, Roland. I got to hear Zig twice while he was alive, and
Wow.
it was amazing, you know. And what he said is, even if you think that I'm, you know, knowledgeable and I'm inspirational, I still have to inspire myself every day. So he was, you know, living the time when you'd pop in the cassette tape in your car, and he said every single day he would put on a cassette tape to listen. And one person said to him, well, don't you think you've gotten enough inspiration? You know, haven't you learned enough? Really? And he said, well, if you've had one bath or shower, now are you clean for the rest of your life? Don't you need to give your mind a bath every day? So I remember that because, you know, we all need, I think, regular inspiration, just like we need food for our body, we need food for our mind and our soul. So
that's really good
smart
stuff. And I think there's a conditioning that happens over a period of time when you continuously reach for the tape or reach for the button and say, let's start the process of feeding myself positivity. Whenever you turn the light on for the positive and for the forward movement, that's a polarity issue. And you condition yourself after a while where you don't have to turn away from everything, and you don't have to put the bad stuff aside. You're automatically there in the positive vein. I think that's a conditioning that happens.
Right.
And so that's really great stuff. I love Zig.
Yes, he's great.
I wanted to move on to a major part of what you've been doing, and I was involved with you, and I was really thankful to be involved with you. But part of your expression has been in children's books, and also a combination of that and endangered species and nature. And you wrote a book that is becoming very, very successful called Dancing with Text. And I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that experience a little bit, because you are indeed not just a writer for other people. You're an author. You come up with your own original stuff. And so can we talk about text for a bit?
Sure. In fact, I'd like you all to take a look at the cover. I brought it so you can take
cool.
it. Very proud of this illustration. So this is a true story. It says Dancing with Text, the remarkable friendship to save the whooping cranes. I heard this story. Of course, I elaborated on the original story, but I heard this on a video shoot back in 1995. I was the writer and co-producer of a video that Amico was sponsoring about the International Crane Foundation. It's the world's only place that takes care of all 15 species of cranes, located in Baraboo, Wisconsin. And Amico's objective was to educate their international marketing managers that they were doing something good for the environment, and they were building an outdoor whooping crane exhibit. So I was asked by the videographer to interview the Amico executives and the co-founder, George Archibald. And I was just enraptured when I first came to this place. You know, talk about a connection for me at the soul. You walk through the gates of this beautiful wildlife sanctuary, and you hear the call of the cranes from over a mile away. So imagine this, and there's a nice little dusty path and the trees all around you, and you just feel like you've stepped back in time. It's just you and the birds, and they're outdoors in these pens. So off camera, George Archibald told me a story of how he had danced with a rare bird who believed she was a person. And I stopped him. I said, come on, now that's just a joke. You're kidding me. He said, no, I was friends with this rare bird. Her name was Tex, and she was imprinted on a zookeeper. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, she was raised initially by this zookeeper. So since she only saw the zookeeper, she thought she belonged with people, not birds. And when a scientist later came by and took Tex away from the zookeeper, because he actually physically brought her to his house in a cardboard box, the scientist found out that Tex would not hang around any other crane. She only wanted to be with people. So Tex went on a journey where she left the San Antonio Zoo, where she was first hatched, and went to a place called Patuxent Wildlife Research Center, which is the United States' first wildlife research center anywhere in Maryland. And she still didn't hang around birds, but George was studying ornithology at Cornell, and he heard about this bird. He went to visit her, and he and his college buddy decided to have, live their dream and build a place where all the cranes could be protected and grow. And they got 14 of the 15 species, but they needed to get one more, the rarest of the species, the whooping crane. And through a bit of negotiation, George was able to get Tex and another male crane named Tony to come to his foundation. And I won't go through the whole story. You'll have to take a look at it. But basically, it took 6 years of dancing. And what that meant was George realized that Tex would not identify with other birds, but he thought that maybe she might consider him to be her mate by moving into her shed. Now, don't worry, this is not X-rated. He actually had scientists giving special injections to the bird, but all cranes do a mating dance before they lay an egg. So he moved into her shed, and he wanted to see if she would actually consider him to be a dancing partner. He had his bed with a chicken wire dividing his bed from the rest of the shed, so she couldn't get to him while he was sleeping. But she motioned to him in the early dawn, and they started dancing, and he never gave up. So I was just really taken by that story, that he had enough faith and belief and perseverance to keep going year after year. And there were 2 seasons when this was during the spring when the birds are mating, 2 seasons when he couldn't physically be with Tex. He got substitutes to dance with her, but she still didn't lay an egg. And things happened all along the way until finally in the 6th year, an egg was hatched. I'm kind of abbreviating it. And a little chick was born. They named the chick Gee Whiz. And that chick hatched other chicks, which hatched other chicks. And because of that one fertile egg, that really helped save the whooping cranes from extinction, because at one point they were down to about 15 birds around the whole world. 15 whooping cranes, very few. So now there are like over 300 whooping cranes. They're still the most endangered, but they're not bordering extinction. It was one of the greatest turnaround stories of all environmental stories. And George was actually asked to be on the Johnny Carson show in 1982 to tell the story. So what happened to me in a nutshell was I decided I'd love to write a children's book about it. I had no experience writing children's books. Basically, my experience had been in writing for business or personal stories. And I took courses and went through a long journey myself to finally get this book published. And it became an Amazon bestseller over Cyber Monday and Giving Tuesday. And it's getting more and more acceptance into various stores and environmental gift shops. And some special news, if I could add to that, when you follow your passion, I want to just recommend this to everyone. Find out what you're really happy doing. When you follow it, more good things will happen. It's like a door that opens up. So I went through so many challenges in writing this book. You wouldn't believe it. And I stopped a lot during the way. It was like a 20-year process. And even the people at the International Crane Foundation were kind of giving up on me because so many things were happening and it wasn't getting done. But finally, with enough encouragement where my younger son just told me to forget the story, I realized I had to get it out because it was deep in my heart. Now the book is actually going to be promoted through a new website coming up August 1st called Brain Academy, Brain, ACADEME.com. It's a new program for teachers, parents, and coaches who want to learn how to teach to the brain. And this book will be the first product in their store. And happily enough, just recently, like a few weeks ago, I found a teacher who wanted to write a teacher's guide for this book. So now a teacher's guide will be done very, very soon, probably within the next week or two. So the teachers or homeschool parents or whoever would like to use this as a teaching tool can do that as well. So I just wanted to share that a lot of good things have been happening because I didn't give up. And that can be applied to all of you. If you have some story that's burning in your heart and you want to write a book about it, I say, don't give up, have faith. I'm happy to be of support to you, and you're welcome to reach out to me.
Thank you, Lynn. And I want everybody to bookmark this in your brains. Replay this event and watch the middle 10 minutes when Lynn tells about following your passion, because it's one of the things that we are so high on here. Now, Bill's got some comments that I think directly related to the book.
Yeah, well, Lynn was relating to the whooping crane story from, I presume, her time when she lived in northern Canada. And she says whooping cranes migrate to the north of Northwest Territories. The park sanctuary there was part of their survival.
Wonderful.
And I just wanted to, I was just listening to what Lynn was saying about not giving up. And that reminds me of another Zig Ziglar quote where Zig says, people can stop you temporarily. Only you can stop you permanently. So we're thankful that that Lynn jumped over the hurdles and made it to the end with her story and sharing that.
Thank you, Bill.
Perseverance reigns. And that's such a great example of that, Lynn. Thank you. So part of your story is broken up into many, many segments of success and challenges and overcoming those things. And it brings to mind that you are involved in so many things. You do so much. And one of the things that you're leaning towards in the recent months is live streaming show interviews. So I wanted to move the conversation in that direction. But before we go into that, I wanted to just say, kind of review it because it's hard to include everybody. But We Wake and Lowland and Rosbets and Atlanta, Birmingham, and everyone there commenting so prolifically. I love it.
Thank you. That's so nice. That's what makes this so exciting,
And Rosbet says, love the reminder bath. And Atlanta says, meditation is a great way to give your mind a bath. So the bath thing stuck.
Yes.
That worked out. And Roz also says, I am, and into the positive. I am being the state of being, I am. And she also follows that by saying, and she is into the positive. If we're into the positive, we can conquer a lot just by being positive. So thank you, Roz. I like that a lot. So, wow. Okay, I don't want to get hung up on the cranes. But I do want to go on to the concept of your interviewing, because I've said this for easily 2 years now, that you are one of the best interviewers that I know. And before we get lost in the conversation, Bill had something. You want to bring that up, Bill?
I think he's still muted.
Well, yes, but he had a comment that we would maybe like to bring up here.
Yeah, it's from We Wake. He says, live consciously without attaching oneself to results, positive or negative. What you think is negative today may be the biggest positive thing tomorrow. So,
wow, that's great.
Yeah, whether negatives may be mistakes or the way you look at things, looking back later.
I wanted to comment to Vivek on that. Vivek, my husband's reading a really great book right now. He looks at different books on Amazon. This one is called End Your Story, Begin Your Life. And I first looked at that, it took me aback. And what you're saying makes perfect sense, because the book by Jim Drever addresses the fact that if we are attaching ourselves, as you said, don't attach yourself to negatives. if we attach ourselves to a certain story about ourselves that's negative, then we're living in that framework. So if you can just separate, then we can really live our life. So that was a good point you made.
Yes. And I think that the issue for people is the story that we tell ourselves and other people about our experience or what happened to us or whatever gives us credibility for what we're about to say. And so if we tell everybody, well, this is where I've been, so I understand something to a certain extent, then you have credibility and makes you a bit of an authority on what you're saying. And people start to understand, that's why I should listen to this person. That's why they're believable. They know what they're talking about from their perspective because they have experienced something. And that's very important. But then from there, it's like, this is what I overcame back then and why I'm saying what I'm saying. But this is who I am now, and this is where I'm going.
Exactly.
So it's all about that forward motion.
Can I add one more thing to that?
Yes.
Forward motion. And this is not into the live streaming yet, but we were talking about the philosophy of telling our story, which I think is so important for everyone to hear, because we are our stories. We are what we believe about ourselves. In that one time period, which I mentioned earlier, when I was really at my lowest of lows, when 3 very special people in my life passed away, I put out a prayer for help. And whether you're religious or not, I believe that we all have spirit guides, angels. We have some, spirits on a higher plane around us. So if you are open to getting help, things can happen. So one of the good things that happened to me when I was at my lowest is I was led to this book called Radical Forgiveness by a man named Colin Tipping. And the book was really all about forgiving not only other people who have hurt us in our lives, but forgiving ourselves for things we've done that we feel badly about. And if we can release those negatives by seeing them as a positive, as Vivek just said, what is the gift in the negative? Then our whole mindset turns around and things change. So I just would like to remind everyone, as you start thinking about your stories, consider that the negatives are really positives that help you gain some knowledge. It was really a gift that helped you grow into being a new person. So I just wanted to add that.
It's a great, great message. And obviously this entire show could take the turn into philosophical discussion, right? Yeah, but obviously the positivity is the thing. And what we decide to do with our own brains, either feel sad and negative and angry and fearful, or do we have hope and faith and we move on to something and express ourselves where we know we can make a difference. Right. So in doing that, you are moving into interviews. And as I've said for years now, you're one of the best interviewers that I know. It's just a natural thing. When you're in an interview, it's exciting, and the people get drawn into it, and they're able to express a lot of what they want to say, and you're able to help facilitate that. So let's talk about your coming projects and your movement into live streaming interviews. Okay.
So first, let's define live streaming. We know what live streaming is, and I would bet that anyone listening to this program probably knows, most of you, I'm sure, knows what live streaming is. But if you were to go out and ask somebody, do you know what a live streaming interview really means? They might pause and say, well, I'm not sure. I've just done some questioning myself with people. So first, what is live streaming? And I define it, and Roland, you're also an expert in this. I define it as an interview that's live, it's happening right now, where people can engage with you just like we're doing right now. People can type in comments or ask questions live during a broadcast, versus a private interview where if I was being interviewed and Roland and Bill were here, but there was no one in the audience, I would just call that an interview. Would you say that's correct, Roland?
Yeah, I would agree with you totally.
Okay, so
that's what traditionally where you came from. I mean, that's all interviews were that style.
Right. So live streaming gives everybody an advantage. And why? Well, just think about it. Right now, you can communicate with me directly through the comment stream, and I can address your comments. there isn't any ability to really do that in a traditional video interview unless someone was coming to a YouTube video and writing comments later. But nothing is happening at the moment. So this is a wonderful way where we can really get to meet and greet and engage with each other and really know each other. Before I had a live streaming program, which I had put on hold and will be reactivating, the Difference Makers, I was doing an audio program, which was also wonderful, interviewing different thought leaders on how they made a difference. And it was a lot of fun. And I still think it's great to have audio podcasts, but there's something special when you see someone's face. You can communicate at an added level. You can see me, and hopefully I can see you if you were coming into the green room afterwards, or in a later conversation, we can have hangout chats. But live streaming allows us to get to really know someone well. And then in addition, you have a recording that you can use on your website, or you can repurpose it on social media. And one of my guests, remember a past interview, Shira Hunt, has used the interview that I did of her over a year ago, and she now has over 2,000 hits. 2,000 from that 1 hour. So imagine the power of leveraging your time, taking 1 hour of time to do an interview, and then having people watch it at any time, day or night. It's really powerful. In fact, a recent research study showed that it says that by the year 2020, 82% of internet traffic will be through video. Is that amazing? So if you can take advantage of this and consider being interviewed yourself, or having Roland, interview you, I think you will find it to be really effective for your marketing, because you get to know people and they'll get to know you. Did that answer the question enough? Absolutely.
And I know that you're going to be doing more of that, and you're focusing on interviewing some important people. But one of the things that strikes me about a live streaming interview is it potentially really puts you on the spot. Now, when you're doing a normal interview, you can kind of set it up. You can have your list of things. You can talk to the person in advance and tell them what you're going to ask them, and then you can so forth. But when you're live, everything's kind of coming at you on the fly. And I mean, Lynn, I'm interviewing you, but you don't know exactly what I'm going to ask you. We may have talked about things before, but I could put you on the spot. And the ability to field those questions and come across confidently is very much an enabling thing that stands for the people's authority, and that confidence level and that ability to answer on the spot and not be afraid of sitting there in front of the camera and corresponding on that level. That in itself adds credibility and authority to the people in the video. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, definitely. I was smiling because I don't know if you're reading my mind. See, I'm very comfortable talking to Roland. We've known each other for several years. So I also admire people who are willing to come on a program who might not know me very well, but they trust me. But it is a scary leap when you know you're going to be on camera and it's happening live. It's not going to be, coming back and re-editing this. And I've had some mistakes technically where Roland has saved me. And I think you just have to be willing to say, I'm going to just allow whatever happens to happen. And if I fail, there's a great saying, people say, fail forward, just keep going. I don't know if I should reveal the biggest mistake that ever happened, but things can happen technically. So I just feel like, it's an opportunity to get to know people and for them to get to know you and to make a difference by sharing great stories. And it's great. I think it's vital, as Roland is doing right here, to have a wing man or woman helping monitor comments and being there. Well, I'll share the mistake, so you can all feel assured. I mean, I don't feel like, it's always easy, but I'm willing to take the plunge, willing to risk, because I know ultimately I'll grow and everyone else will benefit. I had one interview where I typically write questions ahead of time and I keep them at my desk and I might glance at them, but I focus on the person. I don't focus on comments. And so one time I thought I would just move my interview screen a little bit, shift it to the side, and have my interview questions on the screen to the left. So after I read a question, I just went to click X to click out of those questions, but I clicked the wrong X. I actually clicked X to get out of the interview. So here I am. I just introduced the guest, and Roland was in the background, and he had no idea what, he didn't know what the interview questions were going to be, but he did a masterful job, having the guest say, would you please, introduce yourself? I was giving an overview because, I'm sure Lynn will be back shortly. And of course I did come back into the program, but, it makes it for a good laugh. And then, we're all human. So that's the great thing about this.
All of a sudden I was promoted from the wingman to the interviewer.
Right.
And I didn't really know what to think, but we just took it in stride, and then we carried on, and then Lynn popped back in, and we picked up and went, and it was a fine interview.
Right. So you just have to be willing to just put yourself out there, and people I think will appreciate you more for it because they know that you're real. You're not hiding behind anything, and
Exactly.
it makes it more fun.
Exactly. That was the point that I was making. And so when we're speaking of people and doing this thing, a lot of the people in our audience today have been on the screen and on video and been experiencing what it's like, and several have had their own shows, and Lowell Ann's got her own show. Andrew is on camera daily, and several of the people here have experience in live streaming and in video. So there are some people with some experience there. But when people talk about this, there's a fear factor that rises up because of the lack of experience. And so the concept is just now growing. We're on the early adopter stages of the wave of live streaming. So it's on the upswing right now. But we're in the, according to Ted Rubin, we're right about in the early 16% of the early adoption stages of what the wave is going to be like between now and a couple of years from now. And that's an early era. Most of us have been doing this for 2 or 3 years, or possibly a little longer even. Heidi's been doing it for more like 4 years. And Lowell Ann's been doing it, has had a show for over 3 years herself. And so there are a lot of people who have experience with this, but the newcomers are going to have this challenge of like, do I want to take the chance of trying live streaming? And I want to just make the mention before we go on that it's not as hard as it seems. And everybody out there can do it if they want to. So there are ways to get over it and ways to get into it. And you will enjoy it if you try. So Bill's got a comment from somebody.
Good point.
Yeah, Lowell Ann has a question for Lynn. She says, Lynn, which is easier, being an interviewer or an interviewee?
Oh, I like that, Lowell. I would say, to me, it's much easier being the interviewee. I'd like to know what you think, because Roland is really the driver in this case, and Bill is at his side. I'm in the back seat. I'm the interviewee. I'm, ready to answer any questions. I am not the one navigating the interview. So when you're the one in charge, you have to be aware of both the technical aspects, as you know, as well as the content, and keep things moving. So I think it's much easier being interviewed. I'd like to know what you think.
I just wanted to share with Lynn that Alana Birmingham is really enjoying this conversation.
Oh, thank you, Alana.
Thank you, Lynn and Alana.
Fun.
Yeah, I really appreciate people commenting there. I like virtually all the people in the audience right now. I would like to introduce you in person if I could, and I'll settle for not in real life, but in virtual life, and maybe we can make that more of a connection in the future, because indeed you and I met online.
Yes.
And I consider you one of my closest friends. You and your husband. We've seen you and your husband. You've come down to Southern California. What, 3 times?
3 times. So this is the power. We didn't even met the power of live streaming. You really get to know people if you see them and connect with them. And Roland, he decided to connect with me because he wanted to know what I was really like, because he thought maybe I was a snooty person or something. I don't know why.
Now you're putting words in my mouth.
Okay,
That's not part of the story.
All right. Well, anyway, we got to know each other through Hangouts on air, and now it's live streaming. And we just had such a great connection that when my husband and I had some free time, I said, let's get to meet Roland in person. And so, and then his wife, Barbara, and we got together, and it was so wonderful. We wanted to come back again and again. So we've gotten to know each other in person 3 times, but it's like we're old friends from many, many years, because that's, I think, the benefit of this live streaming. You really get to know people, you know.
And Lola, I just wanted to interject for a section. Lolan answered your question to her question.
Oh, good. What did she say?
She would say that being an interview, because for her, curiosity is key.
So what does that mean? Being an interviewee or interviewer?
Being an interviewer, where she could ask questions and have
that's
answers
easier.
to her curiosity answered.
Okay, well, that's a good
And the
point.
other thing I wanted to just,
Sure.
I'm kind of stuck on Zig Ziglar today, but he applies to a lot of the things that Lynn is saying. And she was talking about getting going and making that huge mistake where she knocked herself out of the Hangout and was embarrassed and all of this stuff. And it reminds me of another Zig Ziglar quote, to encourage people just to get started and do the best you can. And that's, if you go as far as you can see, once you reach that point, you will be able to see farther.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, Bill.
Basically, just start with what you know, and you know, as you do more and more, you'll learn more and more. And I'm sure that was probably your experience, Lynn.
Definitely. Thank you. Good point.
That's funny stuff. You know, it's interesting. I'm reading the comments here, and Alana Birmingham says, I find the older I get, the less I am willing to take chances. It's a hard thing to overcome. Now,
but see, that's a mindset, right? Now, Alana, you just said something negative to yourself.
Exactly. Well,
the older I am.
I don't mean to jump on Alana, because we all do this. Okay, most of us do this. And what your comment said was, it's a hard thing to overcome. So you've molded this concept of that's hard for me, and it will be a lot easier if you number one, don't believe that. It's not a hard thing if you decide for it not to be. And let's go back to her statement.
It's so true. You can put a different thought in your mind. You can actually program your mind with the older I get, the smarter I get, the wiser I get.
And she says it's harder for her to acclimate herself to taking those chances. Whereas I find that in my third part of my life, I'm taking more risks and chances than I ever have in my life. I'm not skydiving, maybe, but as far as as far as personally reaching out there, I'm exposing myself to the elements, so to speak. Now, don't take that wrong, but I'm exposing myself personally to the elements of what's going on around me, and I'm enjoying myself. I'm expanding into my joy, and I'm feeling comfortable, and it's working for me. So it can be different if you like it to be, Alana. It does not have to be so much of a challenge. What's Bill bringing?
I was just bringing up Alana's comment.
Oh, okay.
Right, that was a good point. So you can change your mindset, Alana, and you can be whatever you want to be. That the older I get, just change your mindset there. They call that thought viruses. Energy healers deal with thought viruses. So, and I've gone through energy healing. You can tell yourself a different story, and then you'll have different results, and you won't feel it hard at all. You know, it's all in your mind.
Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve, right?
Yes, I was going to say the same thing at that moment.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, that's perfect. We're on the same mindset. Napoleon Hill.
The other one that I repeat often is Earl Nightingale, who says, we become what we think about. So if we're worried, we become the worry. If we're angry, we become the angry person. And we become what we think about, and we can always choose what we think. And so that's why being positive is such a great thing, and being polarized in that consciousness that is like solution oriented and deciding what good comes from this and what can I take away from me that benefits me, that sort of an attitude will pay off, because that's the energy you're putting out into the universe, and what goes around comes around. So I believe this thoroughly. I believe all the basic stuff is absolutely true. Well, we're approaching the top of the hour, but before we let you go, Lynn, is there anything, I know that we could sit here and talk for another hour easily.
This went by like a blink, didn't it? It went by so fast.
Yeah, but I mean, what I don't want to do is close out the day without you having been able to talk about anything that is important that you were thinking about having in the discussion today. So I wanted to go back to you and you kind of free you from my questions and say, what would you like to add to the day?
Well, thanks, Roland. Well, I wanted just to give you my contact information. I've been in the throes of redoing my website for quite a long time, as Roland knows, because he's been working with me. And it's still being in process, but I would love you to connect with me. I've just recently finished my 7-step story guide, and these are really invaluable tips to getting your story out into the world. It is not even up yet, but if you would be kind enough to put your name and email in my current website, differencemakersmedia.com, I will be sending you my 7-step story guide. It is getting illustrated right now. I also want to let you know that Dancing with Text has a website, dancingwithtext.com, and that also has an opt-in for a free audiobook. So if you'd like to hear me narrating the story with some original music to it, you're welcome to go to that site. My email is lynn@differencemakersmedia.com. I will be looking for people to interview very soon. So if you'd like to be interviewed, if you have a story you'd like to share, if you're a business leader, you're a nonprofit leader, or you know people who are making a difference, please feel free to be in touch with me so I can help bring your story to life. And I wanted to say thank you so much for taking your time to be with us.
And I just wanted to mention before you close out, Roland, that those links are in the intro and they'll be in the outro for people who want to go back and find them. And we'll ask Lynn to actually post them in there. That way her profile image will be in the VCP comments, and you can get a hold of her directly or scroll over her image and follow her wherever she is at on the World Wide Web.
Thank you.
That's
you, Bill.
Great. Well, cool. Yeah. I wanted to make sure that all the contact information is available for people, and not just from the website point of view, but I got to know Lynn by connecting with her and asking her about stuff, and getting involved in some live streaming together eventually. But I mean, I reached out to her and she responded, and we don't need to have a goal of like download this or that, which is very, very good seven-step formula she's got. It's worth downloading it by itself. But more importantly, she's really worth meeting and getting to know Lynn. So I wanted to stress that. And she's focusing on one of the things that we hold most dear, and that is the concept of live streaming video, live streaming shows. And regarding live streaming in general, we are what Ted Rubin calls in the early adopter stage. He describes it like this. In the stream of things, there's the 2.5% innovators. Below that, there's 13.5% early adopters. Below that, there's 34% early majority, then 34% the late majority, then there's 60% on the bottom that he calls laggards. and that won't ever be part of the mainstream thing of what's happening in technology and the development of what's on the internet. But right now, we've been live streaming for a couple of years now. All of us have. And we are well embedded with the fact that this is a very, very important thing. And we are adamant that we are going to stick with it. And we're certainly going to ride the wave and go with the development. But if people are going to wait for the 34% early majority or the late majority, you could be already past the wave where it could really benefit you. That's why if you're going to be involved in live streaming, now's the time to do it. Get an interview, get your show going, try it out, experiment, and get used to the camera, because this is the future. This is the online future. Everything's pointing to video. So I guess that pretty much wraps up
and I wanted to say one thing. Everyone, Roland isn't going to promote himself, but I think I'm okay to promote him. That Roland is going to be offering training packages too. So I would recommend checking, in with him. He has a crash course, a training, and then a 6-week training that he's going to be offering people on how to learn to create your own show. So if you want to learn to be your own show leader, I would recommend checking back with Roland.
Thanks, Lynn. And what you see before you now is me after I crashed and the course. So you may not want to emulate what you see here, but yeah, the crash course is fun. Go ahead, Bill.
I just wanted to thank Lynn for a great conversation, and all of the participants that joined us today for joining in the conversation and helped to direct it a bit. We appreciate Lynn for coming, and of course our regular people that come back every week.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I really sincerely mean that. I hope that everyone here meets each other eventually. If you could virtually shake hands with each other, you're going to discover the real person behind the video presentation, behind the interviews, behind the play online. Determine who the people really are. So thank you very much to the audience for being with us today. Thank you, Lynn, for being our guest speaker. And thanks a lot, Bill, for being the guide on the back end there with all the comments. And I just wanted to thank everyone for joining for Saturday Morning Marketing Smarties. And we'll definitely be here again next week. We got an interesting show next week. And we're going to be interviewing a very important community developer and a promoter. His name is Maurice Evans. And you can look him up if you want on LinkedIn. So that's next week. We've got it all planned, and we'll see you then. Thank you very much, Lynn. Good day. Thank you. Bye-bye. Good day from Saturday Morning Marketing Smarties.
Bye, guys.
Well, my music is supposed to work. There we go.
Nice.